I understand the desire to not reopen old wounds is probably the best way of putting it. But I do want to talk about the police, and we should begin by just having a quick look at one of the tabloid newspapers which this weekend reported that you'd called for the hunt for Stephen's killers to be called off. I mean, I gathered on Twitter, where I follow you, that this may be a little far from the truth.
Can I just say I'm quite privileged, actually, that you follow me, James.
Well, vice versa.
But I think that headline shows a lack of respect for Clive Driscoll, who's a senior investigating officer at the Met, and his team and all their endeavours. Shows a lack of respect for those who are on this journey for justice. And it shows a lack of respect for Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence.
The headline was, I mean, literally, why we should give up hunt for Stephen's killers, says Powell, who witnessed the attack.
And I'm so grateful for the outcry against that headline. I'm so grateful for it because.
But were you misrepresented, Duwayne?
Of course. Well, that's not a quote, is it, James?
No, but there are quotes in the story which possibly you can see how they managed to.
No, we had a discussion about the case, and I think my quotes in the Daily Mirror are quite nearer what was happening.
This was in the Sun on Saturday.
And the thing is, after I'd done the interview and the reporter said to me, "Oh, it's going to be out on Saturday," I didn't even check the paper because I didn't expect there to be anything amazing or shocking in that particular interview. And it's when the show was on, the LBC show was on Saturday.
Yes.
And I got the phone calls. "Are you listening? You know, why did you say this? Why did you say that?" But that was never a quote. But I'm glad for the outcry. I'm glad for the outcry because that means senior officers at the Met who are looking at trying to close down this case will have taken, or they should be listening to this and should be listening to the outcry that nobody wants this case to be pulled until we have everybody involved up in front of the courts.
So why? How did this end up in a newspaper then? What do you think it was in the interview that gave them what they needed to knit together this falsehood? I mean, bearing in mind that most people listening don't know what it's like to be interviewed by a journalist who perhaps has written the headline before he sat down to break bread with you.
To be fair to the journalist, he said it wasn't him. He had written a story and he was quite surprised to see that headline. But I think sometimes when you do give interviews to journalists, you've got to make sure you don't give them any wriggle room. And I think in that interview, I may have given them wriggle room. Yes. And that's why they were able to come out with such a headline like that.
But to be clear, you can't see any point in the future at which you would consider it either wise or fair to give up the quest for justice.
I never ever want the case to be stopped or pulled or whatever they want to call it. I never want them to be. But I was asked, how would you feel if it happened? And I'll be distraught. But then I would understand there has to come a time. But this isn't the time. And that's the wriggle room, isn't it? That's the wriggle room. And that's where they've come back with that article and that headline. But this isn't the time. And Clive Driscoll and his team are doing their best to uncover evidence and to convince people to be involved.